Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's been a while. I got sick towards the second half of the time that I've been gone, and that slowed things down a bit because I would have had this out probably a week ago. But I wanted to do a follow-up on the Androgyne issue. I believe this is part 4 of that mini-series within the overall series of Primordial Theology. I want to start by talking a little bit about the Kabbalistic Jewish position on the Androgyne. I don't know as much about the Platonic position. I just know some basics. That the Platonic position generally supports the Jewish one as far as, you know, the first gods or the first intelligences supposedly being Androgyne, and that being our sort of ideal primordial state. But I know more about the Jewish position. And I want to use that to illustrate the fact that it's not just the Sumerians, it's also the Jewish Kabbalistic position, which actually acknowledges that in terms of human origins, these first human androgynes that they claim to have existed, including Adam and Eve, they were actually an androgyne, an Adam, Eve androgyne. That they were created by lesser deities, not by what you might think, not by the supreme, not by the God of the universe or the creator of the universe. And now you're saying, you're asking, well, what are you talking about? You know, the Jews believe Yahweh is the Most High, that he's the creator. Well, not in the Jewish Kabbalah, not in the esoteric teachings of Jewish Kabbalah, which many Jews are not aware of. Just as very few Gentiles are aware of it, even fewer Gentiles. But a lot of Jews aren't familiar with it either. The Jewish Kabbalistic view is that there are the human race has two major branches, right? The Gentiles and the Jews. And they have two separate creators. So there's the androgyne god, Yahweh Asherah, and the Gentile creator god, Samael, Lilith. So in Jewish Kabbalah, they consider Samael to be Satan, and Lilith is his bride, is his consort or wife. Asherah is Yahweh's wife, which any ancient Mediterranean archaeologist and biblical textual scholar will tell you. Most Christians have not caught up with this information, but it's true. And in ancient Israel, they actually worshipped for many, many centuries. They worshipped Asherah as the consort of Yahweh. And then when the priesthood took over, after a certain period of time, the rabbis and the priesthood decided they didn't want God to be worshipped in the feminine. They just excised Asherah out of the picture, and you get the exclusive worship of Yahweh. But at some point, and I don't recall the dynamic that brought about the catalyst that brought about the separation within these two androgynes, but at some point there was a separation. They split, right? So Asherah later on becomes known as Shekinah. So she's the glory, the Shekinah glory of the temple, the tabernacle. And then in the Septuagint, she's known as Sophia in the Wisdom of Solomon, as well as Proverbs chapter 8, not just in the Septuagint. But Shekinah at one point, she's either driven out of the temple or she leaves the temple. I believe she abandons the temple. And the teaching is that she will return when the third temple is when it's fully built, it's completed and dedicated and or consecrated. That's the kind of the prophetic teaching there, is that she will return and she will fill the third temple with her glory. Part of the reason she abandoned the temple is because Lilith, when she split from Samael, she ended up having a rendezvous with Yahweh, I think is how the story goes. Before that, she had sex with Adam. That was a temporary tryst. There's an interesting, kind of a funny story about how Adam wanted her to do it from below, and she wouldn't she wouldn't have any of it. So feminists are big fans of that story. But anyway, she goes off with Yahweh, I guess, for a while. Perhaps she's still with Yahweh. I don't know the details of it. Samael ends up having sex with Eve, and they together produce Cain. So in the Kabbalistic view, the Gentile race is a product of Satan. It's a satanic race, and they consider us to be evil, which is one of the reasons we are targeted as a race. I know that's not a very popular thing to say, but it's true. And now, what the odd thing is that, well, that gets us into something very different, so I won't even go there. But I will be talking about it in a series that I'm going to be doing on the Jewish Kabbalistic view of Jesus Christ, which is quite shocking if you've never heard it before, and most people have not. And it was quite shocking for me, something I didn't learn until, probably within the past 6 months. And I will get to that in a series on Jesus. But all we need to know for the time being is that there were these two androgynes, Samael Lilith, and Yahweh Asherah. Now it's not Yahweh and Eve, but Adam and Eve that have Abel and then Seth, right? So and then Samael and Eve have Cain. So the Gentile race is considered to be satanic. As a result, another name for Samael, Satan, would be Azazel in the Kabbalistic tradition. So Azazel in the book of Enoch, in other words, First Enoch, chapters 8 through 10, is identified as the chief rebel angel of the group of fallen angels that came down, mated with women, and had giants, or Nephilim. But the whole point of me bringing this up is that in Jewish Kabbalah, you see that the interaction and the sexual escapades that are going on between the angels and humans way before the flood. And this is going on with Adam and Eve, and that is consistent with the Sumerian story about the direct involvement of these so-called, these lowercase g gods, designing or genetically creating humans. And so the same thing is true in this story, is that Adam Eve was an androgyne as well. So humans started out that way. And the snake is accused of a bad thing by causing Adam and Eve to fall and therefore split. So they have a split. Adam is the name of the Adam Eve androgyne. They become Adam and Eve separately, a male and female, after this split. And so I just wanted to illustrate with this that even in the esoteric tradition of Judaism, it is acknowledged that these androgynes were the product of lower G gods, not the product of the supreme being who created the cosmos. So to even if we acknowledge that there is something to these myths, and I don't have a problem admitting that there probably is. I mean, this story exists, this myth exists in a lot of different places. even if you acknowledge that, all that's being said here is that these lowercase g interdimensional beings are manipulating the creation of androgynes. That's not at all comparable to the claim that the androgyne is some kind of ideal state that we should be longing for to fulfill our eschatological destiny, right? Now, their position on the human race, as far as this leitmotif goes, the leitmotif of the creation story, with regard to the androgyne, the teaching is that there are a fixed number of souls or persons, or I guess, well, let's put it this way, so not to confuse anything. There are a fixed number of androgyne souls. There are total going to be an even when we reach the end of history, according to the Jewish view, we're going to come to it. There's going to be a definitive point where history is over. Nobody is reproducing anymore, because the Jews have attained to this godlike state that involves the reassumption of this divine androgyne prototype, whereas Gentiles are going to become androgynes of another nature altogether. We are going to be created androgyne, but not immortal androgynes, not powerful, not all-powerful, and we're basically going to become androgynes in order to prevent us from continually procreating, in order to stop our growth and to basically cause our implosion, to cause our genocide, if you will. So they believe that it's almost like a twin flame sort of deal, where it's not just necessary at the end of time that Jews find a female to reunite with in order to effect the androgynous union. There is actually a specific female soul that they must reunite with, that they were united with primordially, and then that split happened, and then at the end they have to find that soul again and reunite with it. It's pretty bizarre, actually. But clearly, if they were teaching that the God of the universe split like this, literally split, though that's obviously an absurd over-literalization of things. The God of the universe can't split. The God of the universe is not composite. The God of the universe is infinite. The only way to maintain that position is to assume that Yahweh is one of the Anunnaki, or one of the Elohim, one of the gods, the Hebrew gods, which became over time known as the angels, but in reality they are just these Sumerian goddess figures with a lower G. So we see that even by their own admission, it's hidden in the Bible, but it comes out very explicitly in Kabbalah that that Yahweh is just one of many gods. Now, they may believe he's the most high God, which he probably is, in the sense that he usurped the he usurped the position of the Most High, meaning the head of the Divine Council. So the head of the Divine Council, in my opinion, is not the creator of the cosmos. The head of the Divine Council is simply the head of a council of archons that form a council, and Yahweh had usurped that position at one point in time, and he is now the head of that council, which is a council that sort of governs our solar system. So I believe that our Earth is basically being governed by these archons. I know, bad news, I know. I'm not, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. So in this sense, I think the Gnostics were correct. They were incorrect when they obviously when they took the idea too far and decided that the material world overall was the evil creation of this this evil demiurge Yahweh. I don't believe the material world is evil. I don't believe it was directly created by an evil demiurge. Is it possible that there are demiurges that do create worlds? Sure, but I don't think that matter is evil, or that that worlds are created by evil demiurges. Well, it's possible that there are evil creations that are. I'm getting off on a tangent here, but now that I'm already down that road, let me just finish that thought. It's possible that there are worlds where the material world is twisted and perverted in such a way that it reflects the working of an evil demiurge. That could certainly be the case. Would those worlds be on the physical plane like ours, or would they be in a lower sort of astral plane, like a hellish plane? Probably the latter, but I can't prove that. But I suspect that something like that is true. Something like that would be the case. Okay, so anyway, but yeah, I think what we're seeing here, obviously, an infinite God can create an infinite, can create an endless number of souls, an endless number of worlds. He's not limited to a certain number, to a fixed number. And certainly the God of the universe cannot be split down the middle. He would be finite if he could. He'd be an object that could, he'd be an object that you could literally, split it in half with a knife, right? And that's obviously that's not the nature of the true God, the nature of the Creator, the Creator of all things. Now, what's interesting is the Christian view, right? The patristic view. I know this was a view that was favored by many people, if not a majority of people within the Eastern Christian tradition that I belonged to for 15 years, from about 2007 to 2022. They highly favored the position as outlined most clearly, I think, by St. Gregory of Nyssa, who taught that, now while he did not teach that the Androgyne had the characteristics of a male, the characteristics of male and female anatomy, he held that the Androgyne was sexless, and that Adam was originally a sexless androgyne. Nevertheless, the position is very similar to the Jewish view in that they see the fall as comprehending the split, but the split in the androgyne is a direct result of the fallenness of man. Okay, that's where the two views meet up. So Nyssa would say, and this is a bizarre, I don't know how he thought anybody could intelligently defend such a position, but he said that that God created Adam and Eve, male and female, prior to the fall, but in prevision of the fall. In other words, he anticipated the fall by separating them into male and female, because he knew they would bring about death, and that in order for us to continue, in order for the species to survive, we would have to be able to procreate. So you'd think that a God with that kind of, you'd think that the all-powerful God who, has this infallible, inerrant, infinite capacity to see the future would, I guess, well, anyway. we've critiqued some of that stuff already in some other videos. Not the Androgyne issue exactly, but the issue of determinism and free will. You know, if God knows everything in advance, that really does preclude free will if you're coming at the issue from the standpoint of an Abrahamic who sees God as separate from the creation. But anyway, 20 minutes long. Let me just say also that I have this abiding intuition, a very strong one, that these perennial struggles that we've seen for thousands of years between the male and female sexes, in terms of the struggle over authority and submission and things of that nature, a lot of that finds its origin in these very, in my view, unhelpful myths about our ideally being androgyne in the distant in the distant past, at our origin. Because if you're going to explain the fall in terms of a split between the masculine and the feminine, you have to have a guilty party. Well, who caused that split? You know, was it the masculine or was it the feminine? Was it the male or the female? And then when you blame one or the other, that leads to all sorts of deleterious narratives about the evilness of one sex or another. And that's why, in my view, you see a very over-the-top, and believe me, I am the furthest thing from a feminist of my sex that you're going to come across. But in spite of that, it really is quite over the top. For example, let me give you a good example. If you read in the Septuagint, what is it? The book of, what is it called? Not Baruch. There's a book which just lights into women. I mean, lights into them. And it says some pretty degrading things about the female sex. And I think that a lot of that comes from this idea that the feminine was, initiated this fallen condition that we find ourselves in terms of the split within the androgyne. So it's not just then that one woman is guilty. You now are applying this to all women on an ontological basis, because the idea of a split in an androgyne being the catalyst for the fall is a very ontological thing. We're not just talking about judgments and decisions that are being made by unique individuals. We're talking about one person who represents her entire sex at an ontological level. There's an ontological reason why every woman that comes after Eve is somehow evil, okay, because of this. So I think that as we go about trying to develop ideas about the role of men and women in the family, and the roles of men and women in relationships, the roles of men and women in society, in politics, and so on and so forth, that we need to keep in mind that patriarchy isn't necessarily the answer, or at least not the answer as it has come down to us through the Abrahamic faiths. Let's just acknowledge that there is a possibility that we have fucked up in that area. I hope we can at least do that, and try to reappraise the situation in terms of a non-Abrahamic way of looking at the world. Okay, that ends this. I had a lot to say, and it wouldn't surprise me if I log out and then remember that there was something else I wanted to say. But the major point in kind of belaboring what I said about the Sumerian myths is to show that the Androgyne is not. Oh, let me say this before I close this out. I wanted to say something about Jason Giorgiani. I find it quite ironic that this is a man who rejects any notion of an Abrahamic fall, right? Because he believes in this upward, onward, linear evolutionary progress of humanity from our beginnings in a kind of Darwinian evolutionary sense, although he's not a materialist, so take the materialism out of that. But leaving that aside, he's more or less a Darwinist in terms of having a very linear view of evolution, but he has an onward, upward evolution where there is continual forward progress, and he doesn't like this cyclical idea of a fall and then a return, this idea of a Platonic ideal realm and a lower realm of shadows, which I disagree with as well, as you know. But what he does, though, is he espouses the idea that we started out as androgynes, and that that is really probably our ideal state. And I find that really odd, because it implies that we experienced a fall, which would seem to go against everything that he stands for. So I think his philosophy has not quite been thoroughly thought out in that regard. I think there's some other areas we have disagreement, and that will come up possibly in this series, but certainly in another one. But I wanted to make mention of that one now. All right, have a great day.